Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leader in You podcast brought to you by EMC Leaders. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Polina, and I co-host this wonderful podcast with the amazing Dr. Lola Gershfeld.
Hello, Polina, and it's so good to be with you today. I'm glad you're back from vacation. I feel like I get lost when you're not here.
Oh, no, but you do such a good job on your podcast. But I'm actually, very happy to be back. And I did really enjoy the vacation. It was so nice. And it was partly work. So that was really good. And also, I heard that you had a podcast while I was on vacation, which is so good, and that you missed me so, and I feel so honored.
Yes, I did miss you. I had two wonderful colleagues, Neve and Eva, on it,
Mm.
obviously, and they just really made me always alive with our conversations.
Oh, good. I'm so happy to hear that. Well, the reason why I brought that up is because I know that you mentioned you talked about the ATD conference, and I had the pleasure of being there with you and speaking on stage with you. And I thought, of course, I love speaking on stage, and I love doing those kinds of like having those experiences with you, which I thought was so invigorating and motivating. And at the same time, I noticed that a lot of the attendees of the ATD conference had emotional ambivalence, which is actually our topic for today's podcast, emotional ambivalence. And that was really interesting because in some ways, you put all this time and effort and energy into attending a conference that requires so much investment of all different things to really share your passion and change the workplace environment. And yet we did come across a lot of people that are focused a lot around using AI, and mostly because they're really stuck with understanding how to be emotionally connected. And it's almost like, they've kind of given up on how do we find a way to be connected? And we're just going to turn to more AI moving parts in our business. And then the emotional ambivalence came in when it was like, we don't know how to make decisions on whether we should use this kind of program or this is really interesting. We really like it. And immediately people think like, oh, this would be so great for my personal relationships. But it's so foreign still in the workplace. And a lot of people that attended our workshops and our speaking sessions, they did say that it's so uncomfortable to even step into the world of emotions in the workplace that they really do, that fear comes up and they really feel like, well, how am I going to bring this into the workplace? How am I going to make that decision? What if it doesn't work? What if they're going to become vulnerable? And then all of a sudden there's a fear of being taken advantage of with that vulnerability as well. So we saw a lot of emotional ambivalence, and that's why we want to talk about that topic today. So we're going to start with you, Dr. Lola. Share with us, what exactly does emotional ambivalence mean?
Well, emotional ambivalence, when people are not sure, there's like two emotions happening in the inside of them. On one hand, they want to make this decision. They feel like it's a positive way, but on the other hand, they're scared, right? There's a fear happening. And rather than viewing ambivalence as maybe as a weakness or a defect or more indecisive in terms of making decisions, we want to really understand what drives that ambivalence. And usually the ambivalence comes across through fears. The fear number one is making the wrong decision, right? Making the wrong choice. So there's a lack of safety in the relationship with a manager, within the team, that somehow if you make that decision, you somehow will come across as incompetent. So that's a biggest fear for people, is making the wrong choice.
So this is interesting. I just recently bought a book. It's funny that we brought up this topic to discuss the podcast, because I bought a book a couple weeks ago, and it's like the power of making decisions without overthinking them is the title of the book, something like that. And I was at the bookstore because I'm like, my dream is to have a library one day, I think, with all of your books, displayed in like in a display case. But I like the self-help books because I'm like, wow, I've really, really struggled all my life with making decisions. And one of the things that I did notice is like, well, it's true. The fear of making a wrong choice is the inability to trust yourself in the decisions that you're making. Because if you do trust yourself, then you know that whatever decisions you are making, it's the right choice. But then it was like this whole new perspective that I understood after incorporating using the EMC process as often as I do now in my life and in the workplace. It's like, what if the choices that we have to make are not wrong or right? What if they're just choices based on how safe we feel and how trusting we feel of ourselves to make a choice? So it's not really about the choices. If every single choice was not wrong or right, the choice was just a choice that was made by someone who was actually confident in their ability to make the choice that was best in the situation that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because in the moment when we are not certain, what's happening for us is there's a fear of somehow feeling facing the consequence, right? The fear of being somehow rejected or judged by the other person, or within your team, by somebody else. And if you don't have a secure relationship with those people, you will be a lot more fearful of making that choice. Whether if you do have a like a secure relationship, you're a lot easier to take risks. Right?
What about the relationship one person has with themselves? Because if this is like a life choice that you are making, like let's say you're at your job and you have the opportunity to become promoted, for example. So the choice of you getting promoted could also mean, well, you're going to be paid more, but yet you will also have a lot more hours. And so maybe you have to adjust the lifestyle that you currently live. So how does one go about making those lifestyle or workplace decisions if they don't necessarily have that secure relationship with themselves?
Well, I think secure relationship with themselves comes from secure relationships with other people, right? So, I mean, you are inside of you, you feel confident and comfortable when you have good relationships with people around you, whether it is personal relationships, work relationships. All relationships make you feel confident about yourselves or less confident about yourself. Right? So the ambivalence actually comes from knowing that people who are around you, they will not turn away from you if you make a wrong decision. They will still be with you. They will accept you. They will not turn away. They will not walk away. They will not reject you, because rejection, obviously, and abandonment are the worst fears that we have. So, I mean, that kind of moves us to the next fear that people have, is fear of vulnerability. At work, we are always vulnerable. We make a decision, we make a mistake, we make a wrong choice. There's vulnerability all the time. And so if people are afraid to show their vulnerability, or they don't have a place where they can reach out to another person in moments of that vulnerability, they feel alone. So when
Which
they
then
don't,
increases their confidence to be able to make the decision.
Exactly. And if they try to reach, and they come across as like judging or criticizing or blaming the other person, well, that only creates more insecurities within yourself and within the relationship. So we have to understand our fears when we have this emotional ambivalence, and what drives that emotional ambivalence.
I think with any decisions, we get stopped or blocked from moving forward in decisions because of those fears, fear of failing, which I think is very common, fear of being judged, which is also very common, fear of also any negative consequences, especially at work, right? If you could be fired, for a decision that you made or written up of some sort, that is kind of hanging over your head. You don't want to, make a decision that could lead to that.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen that people get fired not because they make wrong decisions. They get fired because how they respond to those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
For example, they don't take like care, or they don't communicate. They just let it go. They ignore, they avoid, they push back, they defend themselves, right? Like, what are you
Yeah.
like? Why are you getting so upset? So
Mm-hmm.
so in those moments when people show indifference, when people show as if like nothing happened, that creates a lot of distress for the organization and for teams, and that is what gets people fired. Not that when we make a mistake, and when we can face it and we bring our vulnerability and say, ouch, I made a mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have the courage, the strength, but most importantly, we can only say those things when we have a security in our relationships.
Well, I think also when people struggle to recognize or respond to a mistake they possibly made, it's a lot of shame for them. That's what's so difficult for someone to acknowledge. Okay, like, yes, I did this, and this was the consequences of the decision that I made, because we're so conditioned to be looked at as a bad person if we are making a mistake or a bad decision, right? So we can make a bad decision and then we're conditioned to look at it like, well, we're a bad person. So then we feel that shame. And then when we feel shame, it's very difficult to like live with that shame, or live with that, facing that it's actually possibly might be true that we made that decision and now we are a bad person. You know what I
Well,
mean?
again, our longing for connection actually is activated a lot more when we have a vulnerable moment, like we made a mistake, right? We want to somehow right away automatically call somebody and say, "Oh my gosh, look what I did," right? If we have a lot of experiences where we have called that person or the other person or people around us, and we receive the positive support, like they were there for us, they didn't judge us, they comforted us, they held our space, then we have a positive experience, so we will not be so scared to call them or feel shameful to calling that, and reaching out to other people. But if we don't have a positive experience, if we have experienced some shame and some rejection or abandonment, of course we will be very fearful to call them and reach out.
So before we got on this podcast, you had mentioned about this specific model. I think it was called Verse, where it's like a way to manage emotional ambivalence and how
Yes.
you could, be able to recognize what's going on. And that would help you to make the decisions, to give you that strength and confidence to make the decisions. So I think I hear that a lot too, is people, I get this comment a lot. How are you so confident? I do get that someone told me the other day, I hope that when I grow up, and this is a grown up person, by the way, I have the 5% of the amount of confidence you have.
And I actually, at the ATD conference, people came to me and they say like, wow, I love Polina's energy and confidence on stage, right? I think it's all those piano lessons that you took that is something else.
I don't know about that, because I do notice that I didn't really have, I mean, I taught yoga for a long time, and I remember, I think it was like recognizing that you can't please everyone, not everyone's going to love you. I went from like wanting everyone to love me and like, oh my God, it'd be so detrimental to my life if one person didn't like me or didn't love me, to like, acknowledging and realizing that not everyone's going to like you. Not everyone's going to love you. Some people are going to hate you. Some people are not going to like the way you teach, and that was a turning point for me, but also kind of lift off to right before me learning this process. And the more that I expressed my emotions in a difficult situation, the more I became confident. And I actually see that with my team as well. Every single moment that they experience conflict and they have the ability to express what's happening with them in a difficult situation, they become confident because those really scary, vulnerable emotions are accepted, right? So it's like you shine a light to them, they're accepted for who they are. Like, okay, yes, the person is accepted, but then those emotions that come in that difficult moment is accepted for what it is. It's validated in that moment. And I think that creates so much confidence in someone, because if you're hiding your emotions, and I see this very often where people hide them and would never say it, or I met someone recently that just like, I'm so used to that said to me, I'm just so used to keeping everything behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. And that's like really heavy, right? That's a lot to carry. That's a lot of pain. So it's so much pain that, you're going to, of course, bound to be taking part of things that soothe that pain. That's not necessarily the best ways to soothe that pain.
It's not, because shutting down emotions, even like if you are thinking about, I'm going to shut down those negative emotions. First of all, it takes a lot of energy, lots of glucose coming out from your brain, but you can't shut down just negative emotions. You're going to shut down your positive emotions as well. So that's why it is so difficult. I mean, I've noticed in the past in myself, I would go to a workshop and they would say, write thank you cards to your team. Pay attention to the good things that they do, and make sure to acknowledge it and mention it. Well, when you are shutting down these negative emotions, you're going to shut down positive emotions. You're not going to be able to pay attention to what's happening. And whatever the acknowledgement you want to share, it's not going to come from your heart, because you are going to, make it as something that you have to do. So it becomes a chore, and it becomes very meaningless to you. It becomes like heavy, like it's a burden. It makes sense that people shut down emotions because they don't know how to process, how to organize it, how to express it in a way that the other person could hear. And I love that you said that when people express those difficulties and emotions and feel accepted, they start to feel competent and confident with their experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It made a difference for me, definitely. I also have to remember sometimes when I'm first talking with people, like newly introducing kind of this entire concept and the way that you can organize and express your emotions effectively, I have to remember how it was for me, because I was also very scared. It was also like, oh my gosh, that would be the death of me if anyone ever found out I felt that way. Right. So it's like, I need to remember I was there, because now it's, and the person that I'm referring to, he even said like, oh, you're on the other side. You've already opened the locked door, and have worked through that terrifying pain. And now you're on the other side, and so I do feel like it was deathly terrifying to even think about opening the door that I had kept locked for so long, that I had kept all those emotions like pushed down and really to myself. And we had at the ATD conference, we had a lady who joined our session, and she said, like, why would I even bother sharing? I'm not going to give them the privilege, right? Like, I'm not even giving them the right to know what's going on. Like, I just like that. Why would I even give them the opportunity to take advantage of me in that way? Right. Which is pretty much what she was saying, was that it was so just difficult for her to grasp the concept of sharing your emotions in the workplace, that you do feel connected in a way that's like something that they've never experienced before, and have a thriving environment in the workplace and in your life. And it's so interesting that she just like, I would never even think that that is acceptable. You know what I mean?
Well,
To
it
give,
already shows that there's
you know,
no safety in her team, in her
yeah,
relationships with the team or with the leader. It already demonstrates. It also
yeah,
shows that there's a negative cycle going on. Like even
hmm,
imagining not to be able to be yourself, authentic. They talk about bring your authentic to work. How
yeah.
are you going to
Bring
do
your
that?
authentic self to work. Yeah,
Yeah,
but you
authentic
can't do that.
self-worth. Yeah, how are
Yeah,
you going to do that? So I actually was listening to one psychologist. Her name is Dr. Lu, and she talked about this verse model, which I'm going to share that with you. And that's
yeah,
a way that leaders and L&D professionals and managers can actually deal with emotional ambivalence when that time happens. The acronym is verse. Okay, so
okay,
the first thing is V, validation. Okay, so validation is really helping people to validate the emotions that people are experiencing in that moment with difficult positions that they have, whether it is making their choices or making a mistake, whatever the emotional ambivalence they experience in that moment, we have to validate that. And it's like holding the space, like holding space for those emotions. The second E is for empathic reflection. And we teach that in the EMC process. We actually, one of the 5 techniques is empathic reflection, because we reflect, but we also reflect with
yeah,
emotional language. Like on one part of you is, like really worried about making decisions, but the other part of you is wants to make a decision. So we make it explicit. And when we make it explicit, it becomes less overwhelming. And this is Lisa Feldman work when she talked about even making emotions explicit. And it becomes like granular. You have to make emotions as granular, as specific as possible. So R is for risk, to explore, right? And we have this beautiful list of raw spots and emotions that gives us a structure, gives us a language of how do we express our sensitivities and emotions in the moment when we do feel vulnerable and when we feel ambivalent. So we can organize and clarify emotions. And you always talked about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And you even, I liked on at the ATD stage when we talked about the 5 myth of conflict.
myths.
Yeah,
Yeah,
myths of conflict resolution. You said, here's our prefrontal cortex, and you pointed to the forehead. And here's your emotional, the amygdala, touch it, that's in your back of your head. And so if you are feeling disconnected, the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex. Well, what are we actually doing with our risk exploration, right? We are risking to explore the emotions, what's happening to our amygdala. And as we name the emotions, like surface emotions, softer emotions, primary emotions, what happens is actually the amygdala becomes relaxed, right?
hmm,
This is the time we are speaking to the amygdala, and we're saying, we hear you, you are here. We acknowledging that you are feeling not safe in that moment. So we have V, validation, E for empathic reflection, and
hmm,
R is for risk. S is for seeding attachment. And what does that mean? What it means is John Bowlby, who was a founder of attachment theory, said that we long for connection. And that longing for connection actually comes up for us in moments when we feel stressed and scared. So that's what we have to do. We have to recognize and acknowledge that longing for connection for us in the moment when we have this emotional ambivalence happening. And when we make this longing explicit, we start to acknowledge and recognize and help the person to accept and reassure them they're not alone in that experience. And that again creates calmness. It comes down the nervous system, and the amygdala becomes relaxed. And E, the last E, is for enactment. And we use this enactment in a bonding conversation in stage 2 of the EMC process, where we share what we need to feel safe and connected, and the other person can be accessible, responsive, and engaged to us. They can accept, validate, and reassure. And then we create a corrective emotional experience, which what happens to us? We create more security in our relationship, and now we are no longer ambivalent because the prefrontal cortex is fully open. And now we can see options, we can see different points of view, we can see clearly, and we can actually make it easier and faster decisions.
I think that I was going through Chat GPT course to kind of see what content would be good around this topic for relationships and work and outside of work. And one of the taglines, we kind of brainstormed, my bestie and I, and one of the taglines was connect before correct, like a connection before correction, right? Yeah. Like you can correct the message, you can correct the situation, you can correct the decision, you can correct all those things, but you always want to start with the connection first. And that's pretty much what the acronym is saying also. So you get to connecting first, and then you can do everything else after.
Yeah. And it's actually a really good point, because when people feel ambivalent, they have more anxiety, right? And when they have more anxiety, that means they have a lot more emotions. And so the other person who is listening to emotions, to their ambivalence, they want to fix the problem. They want to kind of like solve the situation. They want to calm the emotions down. And yet, by holding the other person in their space of their emotions, by validating and reflecting empathically, they are actually providing a solution to them. It's not about the content, solving the content issue. It's about creating that connection, reassuring them, saying, you're not alone in this experience.
Well, that was wonderful. I think this is so great for people to remember this, acronym, and think of the word verse, and just, remember that it's the awareness of what you're experiencing, and just really understanding emotionally how you're experiencing the situation before making a decision is what really gets us in that stuck place.
Yes.
So to end this podcast, just a few key takeaways. If you're an L&D professional or you're a manager, of course, we love everyone here that's listening and watching us, and we appreciate so much for your support and your drive to want to become better and to be better in the workplace so that you can return to your most authentic self. So a few key takeaways is just remember, we don't want to jump into problem solving. We really just want to focus on creating that space to hold people's emotions. Ambivalence is the work itself. It's not a roadblock. It's like, hey, it's like your brain is telling you, like, hey, there's something going on here. Let's dive a little deeper to really understand what's stopping us from making the decisions that we need to make or move forward with. And then we also have, managing your own process. This is what I love about the EMC process, is that it really gives a good look at what's happening with you, where your patterns are, how you get stuck, what happens to you when you feel stuck, or when you feel something that doesn't feel so good sitting physically. In fact, before I learned the EMC process, when I used to make decisions, I would make each decision like in my own head and see how that would feel physically before I moved forward with actually making the decision. And it so correlates to using the EMC process, because we think so, we go through the physical experience that we have when we have a conflict or a difficult situation, so that we can identify what's happening with us. A lot of times we don't know how to put it to words. So instead we take note, how are we feeling physically? And that will give us insight to what's actually happening with us. And then the third takeaway is remember that ambivalence is information. It's informing you that, hey, there's something going on here. Hey, like, let's dive a little deeper. Let's open the window and turn on the light and see, like, what experiences that you've had that are causing you to maybe hold back or struggle with making a decision in the first place. And when we look at it from that perspective and we kind of take those and take it into action by using the process during our conflicts or really learning more about what's happening with us, then we actually end up thriving in our workplace environment or creating a workplace environment that's thriving for our team.
Well, that's great summary. That was great. I love those key takeaways. And of course, it takes a lot of practice, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And it's like learning tango. I'm going to my dance lesson in an hour. So
Yes.
it's like learning tango. I mean, I've known how to dance in the past and I've taken tango lessons, but it seems like every time I put on my shoes, I have to remember how to hold my balance. I cannot just lean toward my partner all the time, right? I have to hold my balance. And how do I tune into that music? So it's very much always work in progress.
Well, I think that's with anything, right? And when we don't continue the work, then we die. Right? You can learn everything physically, but I think that mentally and emotionally speaking, that's what keeps us thriving. Is like the constant learning and growing and becoming a better person.
Yes.
And we keep moving those cells in our brain. So thank you very much for everyone who's listening. This is the Leader in You podcast brought to you by EMC Leaders. My name is Polina, and with my wonderful, amazing co-host, Dr. Lola Gershfeld, we are here to support you and help you on your path to creating the healthiest and most thriving workplace imaginable. Thank you so much for joining us, and you'll see us. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.